This is my 40th year as a registered member of the Lost Foundation of Islam. 40th year. The Honorable Louis Farrakhan spoke at my high school, Chester High School, in August of 1980. And I joined after hearing that lecture. When he came back to Chester High School the following year, in September of 1981, I gave the opening prayer for that meeting. When I first met the Honorable Louis Farrakhan face to face in Washington, D.C. in the spring of 1981, when I was a high school senior. When I got home, I told my mother and others that I had just met God, literally. Now, how many of you who first laid eyes on the Honorable Louis Farrakhan thought that about him, especially in 1981? So I am where I was already destined to be, making his great commission known to the world. Now, we cannot emphasize enough that the writers and translators of the New Testament tried to make it appear that the Messianic prophecies described in the Torah and in the Old Testament were fulfilled 2,000 years ago through the prophet Jesus. Well, the Holy Quran also affirms this deviant act. Again, the effort to make history or prophecy appear as history. In the Holy Quran, Allah states, "O apostle, let not those grieve thee who race each other into unbelief, whether it be among those who say, we believe, with their lips, but whose hearts have no faith. Or it be among the Jews, men who will listen to any lie, will listen even to others who have never so much as come to thee. They change the words from their right times and places." Now, right times and places could refer to changing what is prophecy and trying to paint it into history. But we understand with what has been said about the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, the negativity, that people will believe the negativity, the lies, even though they have never come to him to bear witness of who he is for themselves. And that's just the state of America, this mentality. Again, a haven for every hateful bird. Now, the synagogue of Satan, the so-called Jews, needed to portray the Messianic prophecies as history in order to sustain the rule of their maker, Yaqub, over the people. That's why they do it, for those who want to consider the question. Why would they do that? Well, that's the reason. So Christianity was formed by the European enslavers of the world with this explicit objective in mind. And this is what makes it a false and deceptive religion. Even to this day, serious biblical scholars acknowledge the mystery surrounding the Gospels of the New Testament. Serious biblical scholars. Not Reverend so-and-so on the corner of 32nd and whatever street we live on in the hood. They know very little about the scholarship of the New Testament. Most of us with churches in the hood are like little tiny infants, just trying to do our best to understand something we don't know anything about, hardly, because we have not been taught that if your teacher is the slave master, and that's who has taught most of those who preach Christianity, black, and others, of course. Now, let us consider this point from a scholarly 2-volume study of the 4 Gospels. It states, understandably, there's a desire to know what Jesus himself said, thought, and did in the final hours of his life. Yet Jesus did not write an account of his passion, nor did anyone who had been present write an eyewitness account. Available to us are 4 different accounts written some 30 to 70 years later in the Gospels of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, all of which were dependent on tradition that had come down from an intervening generation or generations. Now, one thing I like about real scholars, you just not gonna give them this and put a label on it without them picking it up and saying, okay, well, where did this come from? And then delving deep to find out where every page and every word comes from. But for us as a people that believe in our slave master's theology and way of life, hook, line, and sinker, all he has to do is say, here, nigga, take this. And we say, yes, sir, massa. That's the difference between people who are dead and people who are awake. Now,